My name's Julian Wendelin. I'm a counselor at the Wellness Center, licensed marriage and family therapist. I focus on trauma, also couples, and perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. I'm happy to sit with you today and talk about trauma. So I wanted to start with a general definition of what trauma is, and I think it's pretty relatable, but just any instance of a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. So what we also find from research and in general is that trauma is super dependent on somebody's experience. So just taking birth for an example, somebody could have a C-section and have a really great experience with that. I actually know somebody who had 4 C-sections and none of them were traumatic, very awesome experiences. And then my C-section was extremely traumatic, and I felt like I didn't have choices surrounding it, and I didn't feel like people were validating my experience. So that lends itself to trauma when we feel invalidated, right? So also I want to kind of help people understand the difference between something like a big T trauma, which is what we traditionally think of when we think about trauma. We think about rape, we think about coming back from war, we think about abuse. But then there's also things that we refer to as little T traumas. So that would be, for example, when I went to the EMDR training, one of the consultants gave this really amazing analogy talking about a backpack. And she said, basically, we're all born with a backpack. And as we walk through life, we start off with it being empty. And we walk through, things happen to us, right? So maybe something small happens to us and we throw that small little rock in the backpack. And then maybe something larger happens, we throw that back there. Then 5 small things, throw that back there. And as we go through life, it starts to get really full. So as those rocks get put into our backpack, they can bring with them negative beliefs. They can bring with them overreactions, so small things like overreacting to our spouse. But the fuller you get, the more likely it is to have symptoms of PTSD like nightmares, difficulty sleeping, jumpiness, anger, avoiding triggers, things like that. So as we kind of get that backpack full, if we don't unload it as we go through, life can get harder and harder. So the idea today would be to sit down and start kind of listing out anything that's been in that big T. And you don't have to share with the whole group, but listing out things that have been in that big T category, and then things that have been in the smaller T category. And maybe as a group, you all can sit together and talk about how the things that you've done to work through the smaller things, the bigger things, anything that you're willing to share, but really looking inside and saying, have I addressed these things? Have there been negative beliefs that got stuck as a result, right? So, a young girl whose father was not involved might have a belief that she's not good enough. And so as we go and walk around with that belief that we're not good enough, we act as if we're not good enough. And then our lives start looking like we're not good enough because we're acting that way. And then it's a cycle that just reinforces itself. So I'm hoping that I'm making sense in terms of that. So I think for you guys, kind of 3 columns, big T, little t, and then the negative beliefs. And then if you can discuss what has helped you work through it. So as you kind of sit with these lists, so the big T's, the little t's, and any of those negative beliefs that have come as a result, I want you to really meditate on that scripture. We've got Proverbs 23:7, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. And meditate on, am I carrying any of these beliefs around? What do I need to do to settle these down? And then be willing to share as a group.